Dímelo, mi gente. Marcucci here again, bringing the video. And today we have Senator Peter Durant from Massachusetts. Thank you so much for coming on, Peter. I was here in one of your interviews yesterday with, I think it was CBS.
Right.
It was really interesting. You're a really great person with everything that you do in Massachusetts. So please, Peter, who are you and what have you done for the great state of Massachusetts?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Mark. I really appreciate it. So, again, my name is Peter Durant. I'm a state senator here in Massachusetts. My district it's called the Worcester and Hampshire district, but essentially it's a little triangle right smack dab in the center of the state that encompasses 22 cities and towns. I've been a senator now for about 2 years. Prior to that, I was a state representative for 14. So, so I've been kind of in the at least state legislature for as long as crypto's been around, as long as Bitcoin came around. But we've been working on a lot of different things here in Massachusetts. In one of the things that we're trying now is to put together a Bitcoin reserve and trying to get some momentum on this.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that, Peter. And yeah, that's why we're bringing you on here. We want to talk about Massachusetts being one of the states that's already introduced a bill for a strategic Bitcoin reserve, along with I think there's 26 or 27 states
Yeah.
now. So yeah, thank you for being the first one. So when did you first learn about Bitcoin and digital assets? And what initially like drew you into the space?
Yeah, interesting. When I think about it, I remember back in 2010 hearing about this new thing, this new Bitcoin, and I've always been kind of technology oriented. I always liked technology, and I started doing a little bit of research into it. Um, and I remember sitting down at my computer. I remember like it was yesterday, and trying to figure out what's this wallet thing you got to set up, and you can mine it. I don't really understand it. And so right from the beginning, I was intrigued by Bitcoin. Uh, but I will admittedly say that it was too complicated for me at the time, and I thought, okay, you got to move on to something else in life. Uh, Fast forward, it really started to kind of hit home with me during the around the 2018 2020 cycle that began there. I became really intrigued by it. I actually started mining Bitcoin, mining Ethereum here in my house. I remember saying to my wife, we had found a Bitcoin miner that somebody had put together. They were selling it on Craigslist for, I think the price was like $4,000. And I remember saying, as my wife and I were driving to meet this guy to get the to get the Ethereum miner, I said to my wife, I said, "Promise me one thing," and she said, "What?" And I said, "If this goes really south, just never say I told you so." and so we bought the Ethereum miner. We set it up, and then I built my own. After seeing how one was made, I built my own. So I had a couple of Ethereum miners. I kind of built a little setup in my house where it actually, as many would know, it supplemented the heat in my house for 2 years. So it was great. It was kind of the best of both worlds. But that's really where I started getting involved and started getting really excited and interested in cryptocurrency in general. Did a lot of DeFi work, a lot of mining. I kind of got involved in some of the different mining aspects with the helium miners and all these kind of different DeFi projects during that period. Did okay, and then got wrecked, of course, in the in the ensuing bear market. But it's something that never left me, and I started to see this cycle come up. I Because my life has gotten a lot busier over the years. I've been focusing mainly on Bitcoin and just basically accumulating Bitcoin.
Wow, that's actually a really impressive list. You've been around then. You're like kind of an OG then.
Well, I'd like to think so, but I'm sure there are people out there who've done a lot longer than I have. But yeah, it's just been a fascinating ride, and I just think that I think that crypto is the future. And it's interesting because again, I'm 60 years old, so I'm a boomer. I get it, and I have obviously all my boomer friends will go out and have a beer and stuff, and we'll talk about it. And a lot of them will say, if I can't touch it, I ain't buying it. I think this is ridiculous. And one of the things I always said to them, I said, listen, I said, it doesn't matter if you don't understand it or like it. I said, we're baby boomers. We are going to die soon. I say that jokingly, of course, but I say we're getting older. It's the younger generations, the millennials, the Gen X's, the Gen Z's. They're coming up and they really like this. And this is the way of the future. And they're the ones who are going to be leading the world. So we should try to get on board with what they're doing. We should try to understand it and take advantage of it.
Mhm. So, Peter, when I first hear about Massachusetts, the first thing that comes up is obviously sports, eh,
Yeah.
the big Ivy Leagues, like the big schools, MIT, Harvard, and
Hmm.
the health sector too. I mean, you guys have
Sure.
a lot of health sector. So, what about the financial sector and tech innovation? And how do you see Bitcoin and digital assets being a long-term solution for the state in this economic strategy?
Yeah, you hit on a good point, right? Which is Massachusetts has a vibrant technology center, whether it's biotech, whether it's healthcare. We got some great sports teams, right? We had the Patriots for all those years, and I know that people like to hate the Patriots for their 20-year run, but um, we do have that vibrant sector. We have an economy that's built on innovation, and so clearly we have that brain trust here. We should be taking advantage of all that it has to offer and all it has to offer in crypto. Um, and it's just kind of getting over this hump of people being afraid of it or people not understanding it. And I think we can take off here in Massachusetts. We want people in Massachusetts to stay here, and I get it. A lot of people who come here, they go to Harvard, MIT, some of the big schools. It's an expensive place to live, and so you leave here as soon as you graduate because you can't afford to live here. Um, but we don't want to get rid of that brain trust. We want to allow them to do what they do best, which is create, which is build, and I personally and some of my colleagues, we see crypto as a big prospect here.
Perfect. And in terms of like volatility, right? From what I read on the bill, and we'll get onto the bill later.
Mhm.
Uh, do you believe it's a smart decision, being that it's so volatile, right? And you guys mentioned it's like up to like a 10%
Yeah,
fund. Even I was talking with my dad yesterday, and he was like, it's like too volatile. And I've shown him, like, right, there's been like 99% drops, 53% drops, 80 something percent drops. It always comes back. So why do you think a 10% allocation is correct? Because from what I've seen in the bills, some have 10, some have 5, but majority is around there.
sure. So we put in 10 as a starting point. And we talk a lot about volatility, and I think that's one of the negatives that those who I've done quite a few interviews on this bill, and those that don't understand crypto, those that are leery of it, talk so negatively about the volatility issue. And I don't think volatility is something to be afraid of. What I have said, and kind of what I've tried to preach is, there are traders, people who just want to make money off the short-term movement of a cryptocurrency or a stock for that matter. And then there are those investors. And there's the hodlers here that we call them, right? And so, if you're looking at it as a trade, okay, well, then the volatility can be your friend or it can really hurt you. I try to tell people, look at this not in the 1 year term, but in the 10-year term, 15, 20 years from now. Do that dollar cost averaging. The volatility then starts to kind of smooth itself out, right? What we've seen is Bitcoin has appreciated. I think the number was 60% since it's every year since its inception, and those are with massive drawdowns. So I wouldn't suggest that the state or anybody takes 10% of their portfolio and dumps it right away into Bitcoin, just buy 10% today and have a nice day. Because we may or may not, I mean, nobody really knows, but we may be at the top of this cycle or not very far from the top of this cycle, and we have to go through a drawdown. So, that long-term perspective with a dollar cost averaging type of arrangement is something that can really help smooth that volatility out. And again, I think we have to look at this in the long term. 20 years from now, we're going to say, if I'd only bought it back in 2025, right? Because we're all saying that now, right? I just said that how I learned about Bitcoin, and it's like, oh, if I had just gone through and figured that damn wallet out, I could have had 1,000 Bitcoins right now, you know. But there's no better time to start than the present.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so can you walk us through the bill? I know and that's why I mostly want to bring you guys on, is to explain these kind of things to people that don't even understand politics. I mean, a lot of the videos in my channel I made about Bitcoin and everything and regulation, it takes time. And like you said, it's, we're not going to put in the 10% right away. We might even not even put 1% right away. We have to see it and everything. So can you walk us through the bill? What are the main goals, and why do you think it's so necessary? And you mentioned inflation, and inflation came up today a little bit stronger than expected. I think it came at 3%, but it was like only 0.1%.
Yeah,
And people are like going crazy about it.
yeah.
So I understand that. So can you go over the bill, please?
Yeah. So what we're aiming to do, what the bill essentially says, is that we're directing the treasurer of Massachusetts to we're authorizing the treasurer to uh, purchase Bitcoin equal to up to 10% of the state's rainy day fund. So the rainy day fund, of course, is just that fund that we set aside for a rainy day for financial problems that occur. Now, in government, really, rainy day funds, or at least in state governments, rainy day funds are never really meant to be spent. They help us with our bond ratings and things like that. Well, our rainy day fund right now sits at about $9 billion, which is a fantastic amount. We've got a good rainy day fund. It helps our bond rating, and those who want to loan us money for infrastructure projects or whatever, they look at that rainy day fund and say, okay, it's a safe bet that you're not going to default on your payments, because at the end of the day, we can go hit the rainy day fund. So what we've done is we're saying the treasurer can invest up to 10% of that into cryptocurrencies. And we broadly defined it as cryptocurrencies because we don't want to just narrow it down to one thing. We want to give that office some options. And so we said cryptocurrencies in general. Again, personally, I would suggest that if you're doing investing like that to the state, you probably stick with Bitcoin. We know altcoins can go absolutely crazy. And then what we've said is we're really leaving it to the treasurer to decide. So in government, it's not a business. It works a lot slower. It's much more cumbersome. The build process is really slow. But what we're trying to say is that we're authorizing the treasurer to do this. They have the authority to figure out how much they want to put in it, what assets they want to put in it, and how they want to manage that. So essentially, that's what we're saying. But you can say up to 10%. So again, the rainy day fund's at $9 billion right now. So you're talking about 900 million bucks, almost a billion dollars.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, I saw in the bill that you could also loan out Bitcoin and other digital assets. What is the risk management, or what kind of risk exposure are you guys putting in place for the people in Massachusetts?
Yeah, right now there is none, zero. And let me explain that. You know, the bill again authorizes the treasurer to start doing this. If the bill were to pass, I would not expect under any circumstances the treasurer just goes out and says, "Hey, here's $1 billion. Go ahead and buy some Bitcoin." Then once that bill passes, you set up that infrastructure. You say, "Okay, how are we going to do this? What assets do we want to buy, and how do we want to manage that?" So I think that's something that's really important for people to understand. You don't just say turn on a switch and say, "Here's $1 billion. Go buy me some Bitcoin at the top of the market." Um, so yeah, so you kind of got to work in that fashion there. But when we talk about lending assets, again, we're trying to allow the treasurer some options in how to deal with it once you purchase it, because it's really easy to say, you get this capital appreciation, but there's also the dividend aspect of our investments. We make, we invest in U.S. bonds, for example, and we make 4% per year. Okay, well, you don't have to sell the bond; you just make the 4%. So we just want to give the state options to be able to, try to figure out how best to keep this investment and make it worthwhile.
Got it. That makes sense. And you mentioned your friends that you go and have a beer with, and
Yeah.
you guys are talking about Bitcoin. What about your colleagues at work and in the government? That CBS interview that I saw from you, you said that you guys are not bipartisan compared to other states. You guys actually kind of agree into most of the stuff. So it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, whatever it may be, you guys both get along to sign these bills. So what are the feedback that you're getting from your colleagues or other co-sponsors? What are they saying? Any other
So
concerns?
yeah, so you bring up a good point. In Massachusetts, we always say that we're less partisan than other states, and sometimes that's kind of out of necessity, right? So in Massachusetts, obviously, it's a very blue state. I happen to be a Republican, which means I'm in a very small minority within the legislature. I think we only have about 10% of the legislature. So out of necessity, we have to be bipartisan if we want to try to get anything done. But so we do tend to work together to try to get a lot of these things done. And we've actually had some of my Democratic colleagues are very excited about this. We have last term we had the blockchain caucus, which is a group of bipartisan legislators who come together and try to work on these issues, try to figure out what do we want to submit, how do we want to advocate for this industry. And this year we're doing the same thing, or this term we're doing the same thing. It's not the blockchain caucus anymore because we're folding in AI as well, but it's an advanced technology caucus. And so we've got people who are excited about it. I will say, it's funny. It's probably less the Democrat Republican thing, more the age difference. You know, and I hate saying that again. I'm 60 years old, so I get it. But it's more that age difference. The older folks like myself don't tend to, again, you don't tend to understand it. I can't touch anything. I don't really get what this whole thing is. So there's a lot of education that has to take place, and that's the effort here. I'll note that the legislative process in general is notoriously slow, right? So typically, a bill that comes before the legislature in Massachusetts typically takes 3 terms. So that's 6 years to get something passed. And so it's just kind of this, what we call it is in the industry, if you will, we call it sausage making, right? It just takes a long time, and it's an ugly process to get there. But for us, this starts that process going, and we'd like to see it move as quick as possible because I think we're in danger of missing the boat. And as we start to see countries, states adopting this, you know, I'm a little concerned that there's going to be kind of this gold rush, and the price of Bitcoin can appreciate significantly over the next 5 to 10 years, and you don't want to miss that. You would try to put yourself in the best position so you don't miss out.
No, of course. And if it were to not pass, I think Wyoming it didn't pass, and I think in North Dakota it didn't pass also. Uh, are you might you reintroduce it? Like, what happens if it doesn't pass? I really don't know
Yeah,
if something like that happens.
sure. So typically in the legislative process, so our sessions are 2 years, and Massachusetts, unlike a lot of states, has a full-time legislature, which means you see some states that have part-time legislatures. They come in, they get all their bills filed, and they have to go through their entire legislative process within a few months. So things happen really fast. They got to work really hard to get all this done. Massachusetts, because we're full-time, this takes a long time. So we filed that bill in January. We expect not to even see a hearing on it, to get a public hearing on that until probably June at the earliest. Then bills go through the committee process where they can be rewritten. They take that input. Maybe they want to change a few things, tweak a few things. That's where you kind of do that behind the scenes work to try to get a bill to its final version. And then it starts getting pushed out. So that process, again, can take up to 2 years just to kind of get it through. What you often see with bills is during that process, like I say, you get that input and people start to change it. And that's how you get more people on. They say, well, I'll tell you what, I can support this if instead of 10%, we go to 5 and let's let it increase by 1% per year. That's where you kind of come up with those fine details and how it works itself out. So we expect some of that to happen. we've got a big effort here to try to get the majority of people on board and to try to get the leadership, meaning the Senate president and the Speaker of the House, to embrace this and say, okay, it's not quite as bad as we thought. Let's give this a shot.
Yeah, and actually, does it change if like it passes on a federal level, right? I know the president and David Sachs, the czar, is kind of pushing for a
Mhm.
strategic reserve at the federal level. Does that make it so in Massachusetts are like, oh my God, all right, if they pass at the federal level, let's go ahead and pass it like faster. Does that change or not really?
Yeah, well, it can certainly make it more palatable. It can make legislatures say, well, okay, if feds think it's safe, then maybe we can start to, look at this a little closer. Maybe we can start to take that step forward. On the other hand, sometimes it's actually the opposite, where you want to be the first mover, right? Like Massachusetts is at the forefront of innovation, and we want to be the first one to do this. So sometimes it can be either way. And I'll introduce a third concept here, which is, again, we have without trying to make too much of a political statement, we're a deep blue state. We have what Massachusetts in general would consider a very unpopular president and federal government right now. So if the feds pass it, for all I know, in this state, they could say, well, they did it. We're not doing this. So there's a lot of different dynamics that go on and go into this. We really have to just make that argument on the technology, on the reasonableness of this. And again, we have to be willing to compromise. Again, if they come back and they just say, I'll tell you what, we'll give you 2%, I'll take it. Give me 2%, and then let's start the ball rolling. Let's move forward with it. Let's try to then figure out, okay, is it working? Can we then increase it? So there's a lot of that horse trading and negotiation that has yet to take place.
Yeah. And you even said, I mean, Massachusetts Senator Warren
Hmm.
has been historically, cautious about crypto regulation. So how do you see this evolving in the coming years? Like, what is your view of crypto policy in Massachusetts? You said you're a minor, and my friend was a minor here in New York too. And Con Edison was knocking on his door, like, "Hey, what are you doing there? Like,
Oh yeah.
are you pay like, hello? That's really expensive. You're wasting
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars." So, what is a policy going to look like? Hopefully, you said probably 2 years, but 6 years from now, like, right? Like, what is that goal for you?
Yeah. So the goal again is for us to get that ball rolling. Um, and I don't want to, I don't want to give away negotiation techniques, but what you're trying to say is, give me something. Let's negotiate something that you, maybe the Speaker of the House or the Senate President, give me something that you can feel comfortable with, so that we can at least dip our toe into the water. If it's not 10%, okay, what are you comfortable with? So it's really going in that direction. But you bring up a really good point, right? Is mining worked out real well here when during the last run when Ethereum was doing really well. But at the time, I was locked into an electricity rate of 12 cents a kilowatt. So, I mean, and that's expensive as far as mining goes today. But yeah, so my electricity bill went from about $200 a month to about $600 a month. You get a lot of questions for that, but yeah, and so as you saw that progress, now electricity costs in Massachusetts are about, I'm paying about 28 cents a kilowatt. So it's absolutely impossible to do any of that kind of mining here. But I thought that was a funny story because as you talk about it, you start to your bill overnight goes more than double, and people start saying, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" Because they think you're growing pot or something. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
But
And that's where innovation and like that's where Massachusetts can innovate. That's where you guys can find ways to either reduce inflation with Bitcoin
yeah,
or help miners, come up with some what's that the thing that they give a Tesla
just a incentive or a
like
rebate.
incentives, yeah, like incentives, tax breaks, like something like
Yeah,
that. Like that's where Massachusetts can innovate. And
yeah,
that's what I'm really excited about everything, and that's why I love having you. Anyways, Peter, I'm sorry, Senator Durant.
that's
Uh,
okay.
any last comments, anything that you want to say to the state of Massachusetts, to the people in your county, anything. I truly, truly, I do appreciate it. And I actually been to Massachusetts quite a couple of times.
Okay.
I went to Tufts to like we did like a school tour to like different
Okay.
schools over
Yeah.
there. I love Boston. I have friends over there that they might be watching this, so I'm excited.
Yeah. Boston's an amazing city. It's got so much history behind it. All I would say, Marco, is people need to be open about it, learn about it, and understand what it is, because we're on a path in this country where our debt is unsustainable, where a financial crisis is always on the horizon, and you never know when it's going to hit, right? Nobody saw COVID coming. All of a sudden, boom, the stock market tanks. These kind of events occur, and we're on a very difficult trajectory here in the United States as a whole. And so we have to be able to innovate. We have to be willing to innovate, and that's what I'm asking people to do: is open your mind, take a look at this. It's not the boogeyman. It's an important part of our future, and I think blockchain and Bitcoin is going to become ubiquitous within our society. I don't know when. I might be dead by then, but I don't think so. Technology moves really fast. And I think in 20 years from now, or even 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say, wow, either we were really regretting that we didn't get on board, or we're going to be really happy that we did. And so I just ask people to keep an open mind about it.
Perfect. So thank you so much, Senator Durant. I really do appreciate this moment. Hopefully the bill gets signed and it doesn't take the 2 to 6 year time frame that we're
Exactly.
talking about. And hopefully, the Democrats over there in Massachusetts that I was doing a video about, the different, there's a thing that's called Stand with Crypto. I don't know if you see
Mhm.
it, but it's a website that goes over all the different politicians and kind of their stands. And most of the politicians in Massachusetts, they don't really have a stance.
Right.
So at least let's see if they watch this video and
Yeah.
it changes their mind. And hopefully you guys are the first one to adopt it. I believe in you. You're the first politician to come on the show. So I really do.
Oh, Marco.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I love talking to people about it. And thank you for all that you guys do.
Thank you so much. I will see you on the next one. Bye bye.
All right.